strangers. So, how's your night going? Because I just recorded a whole fucking video that was like a half hour long reviewing Late Night with the Devil, and the sound didn't pick up, so I'm gonna have to redo it. But for a palate cleanser for me, I'm gonna do this video about Immaculate, and I'm gonna have some soju because now I need it. And drink responsibly, please. Video is going to be a little review of Immaculate, which is a 2024 American psychological horror film starring Sydney Sweeney and directed by Michael Mohan. It's written by Andrew Lobel. Apparently, Sydney Sweeney also produced this movie, which that's cool. Good for her. That sounded so fake. That's so cool. I actually really like Sydney Sweeney. I feel like we haven't seen her in anything that really shows us her acting chops yet. Pretty much everything I've seen her in, she's just been like hysterically crying. Handmaid's Tale, Euphoria, now this. She's really good at crying. Immaculate is a movie that stars Sydney Sweeney as Sister Cecilia, a nun. I was just going to say nurse. A nun that's coming from, I think, like the Midwestern United States. No, she's coming from Detroit. And is that the Midwest? She's coming from Detroit, and she has been recruited by one of the priests there, Father Tedeschi, and she's going to a convent in Italy. And the convent that she goes to is full of elderly nuns, and it's meant to be kind of like a final resting place for them. It's a place for them to live out the last days of their lives. So Sister Cecilia is one of a few like younger nuns that are tasked with taking care of them, you know, providing kind of like hospice care, doing laundry, things like that, preparing the food. They show a lot of scenes where the nuns they're being trained to do these really difficult tasks. Clearly life is not easy, in the convent. Obviously you take this vow of poverty, and you take a vow of chastity and obedience to God and those who represent him, like the priests, the bishops, the Pope. So right from the get-go, everybody says to Sister Cecilia, "You're like really pretty." The first time this happens, she's coming through like immigration or something like that. And these two Italian men are interviewing her, and they're basically like, "Oh, what a waste." I didn't really think anything of that as someone who's been to Italy and loved it. Like, I loved everything about Italy, including the people there were so kind. But the men were very forward. So I thought maybe like they're just kind of setting us up. They're giving us an exposition for the setting. So of the young women that Cecilia encounters at the convent, there's Isabel, who I think from her accent is from Australia, maybe. And Gwen, who says she's from Milan. Gwen is very teen angst relative to Cecilia's kind of like saccharine nature. Cecilia's very kind and she's very sweet. And Gwen is straight up like, "I'm here because I hate men." Like, I don't trust men. I decided to just fucking become a nun. I think her story is that she was in a physically abusive relationship. And so she went to a support group and she was essentially recruited by nuns. There's lots of really sexually suggestive scenes in this movie. And I have to say that I'm like really tired of Sydney Sweeney just being overly sexualized by everybody. I don't know if she has agency in that. I think a lot of celebrities, especially young women who are on the rise in their careers, don't have as much agency as they may appear to. So I don't know if that's, you know, something that she jives with, if it's like a recommendation from her management or whatever. But it seems like everything that she's in, she's overly sexualized, except for the Hunger Games. Except for The Handmaid's Tale, which is the first thing I saw her in. She plays a child bride, so I think that would have been really inappropriate. But anyway, there's a scene of Cecilia dressing in her nun clothes. I don't know what they're called. Kneeling before the bishop when she takes her vows, kissing his ring, especially the angle that it's shot in seems very sexually suggestive. Father Tedeschi we meet, who's played by Alvaro Morte, and yeah, hottie with a body, you know, he's you know, one of them older boys.
Let's go put our stuff down by them older boys.
We like that. He genuinely looks like older Harry Styles to me anyways. But he introduces himself to Cecilia and explains that he was once a geneticist and he kind of moved on. He felt called to faith, became a priest, you know, yada, yada, however that happens. Cecilia, in turn, tells him a little bit about her backstory. And she tells a story about how she was, she fell through the ice when she was back home in Detroit. She was nude for some reason, but she fell through the ice and had to wait to be rescued, and she survived. Like, it was a miracle that she survived. And she felt the same way, right? Like, she felt like I was saved for a reason. Someone was looking out for me that day, so I felt called to service. Cecilia, after having a little bit too much wine at, like, the celebratory post-vow ceremony, wanders through the hallways and finds this like hidden, tucked away chapel room almost. And the Mother Superior is in there, and she gives Cecilia this artifact, which is allegedly from Christ's crucifixion, from Jesus's crucifixion. It's one of the nails that was put into his hand, and Mother Superior gives it to her and is like, please, we want you to have this. It's blessed. You're blessed. And Cecilia's like, what the fuck is going on? So the next day she goes to confession with another one of the priests. And we soon realize, because the way that it's shot, the priest kind of keeps getting further and further away from her in the confessional booth. And we find out that she's actually having a nightmare. When she wakes up from the nightmare, one of the elderly nuns appears in her room with a pair of scissors and just like kind of chops a piece of her hair off. And she holds the hair in her hands and she says, she calls her Blessed Cecilia. She says, like, this is blessed. Your hair is blessed. Now, for those of you who aren't really familiar with Catholic lore, I was born and raised in the Catholic Church. And I say that very loosely. Like, my family is not overly religious. And certainly I have left the faith a long time ago. But when saints become canonized, any of their belongings that were on their person at any point in time, I guess, not just at their death or at their canonization. A canonization, by the way, is when someone is declared to be a saint. And that is a rigorous decision-making process that people have to ascertain that during their life, a person has performed a miracle, I think. Or, I don't know. They've done something holy that I'll never do, I'm sure. But anyways, they become canonized, they become saints. And so anything that was in their possession is considered to be a holy object, a holy artifact. Obviously, anything to do with Christ or his life, his death, is also considered to be very sacred. So they're essentially saying that Cecilia is a saint while she's still alive. And Cecilia's like, what the are you talking about? I'm literally just a girl. So there's a scene where Gwen and Cecilia are in the baths because, of course, like, there are generous shots of like bare booby through, especially through like white gauze cloth. It felt very like voyeuristic. And I really felt like Michael Mohan was trying maybe a little bit too hard to be Dario Argento here, especially with it being set in Italy. Some of the scenes, some of the use of like color and stuff like that made me feel that way. But anyways, so they're at this scene, they're bathing. Cecilia gets sick, she vomits. She's brought to the doctor, the infirmary, and it's discovered that she's pregnant. And she is brought before Father Tedeschi and the bishop and the Reverend Mother. And they kind of like grill her on like, what are your vows, bitch? What did you just say that you were going to do? And have you been chaste? And she's like, I swear to God, like I've never, literally, I swear to God, I've never been intimate with a man before. I've never had sex. I'm a virgin. That's my story and I'm sticking to it, right? And they believe her, which, okay. So they accept Cecilia's version of events where she's immaculately conceived, right? That's why the movie is called such. So they believe her that she is a virgin and she's pregnant. And they consider this obviously to be a holy miracle. And Isabel starts to act really coldly towards Cecilia. And so does Gwen to some degree. There's definitely a lot of friction in different directions there. So Cecilia starts to get all of these special privileges. I was like, honestly, you should get those when you're pregnant. Like, you should get a whole bathhouse to yourself when you're pregnant. This shit's rough. So Isabel sneaks into the bath while Cecilia's in there and attempts to drown her. And she says, like, it should have been me. It should have been me. And when essentially the security, but not security, is called, they drag her out and she's kicking and screaming, saying, we need to try again with me. We need to try again. We need to try again. And in one of the next scenes, Isabel leaps from the top of one of the buildings at the convent. So at this point in the movie, Gwen also kind of starts to lose it, but in a different way than Isabel did, because she's starting to really suspect something off going on that no one is speaking up on. And she's kind of like the rabble rouser, where she tries to call it out and gets punished for trying to call that out. And this, I think, is supposed to be the representation of all of Cecilia's support systems being taken away from her. Well, I mean, I guess Gwen was really her only support system there, because Isabel wasn't really, she was kind of mean. So Cecilia is woken from her sleep again one night, and there's this very like haunted house-esque scene of her walking through the convent in the dark with a candle, like on a candlestick in the holder. And she follows the noise, and through a keyhole, she sees Gwen getting her tongue cut out, like old school torture horror style. The next day, Cecilia wakes up. There's like an emergency being called. Everybody's swarming into her room. Her sheets are absolutely covered in blood. There's blood between her legs. Obviously, they're thinking something is wrong with her. There's something wrong with the baby. I forgot to say, this is really important, and I forgot to say this. So when Isabel attempts to drown her, they take her to the infirmary to have an ultrasound done to check on the baby. And they're like, whew, the baby is fine. And Cecilia is like, well, I'm not fine. Like, this bitch literally tried to drown me, because all they care about is the baby, which is very Catholic Church of them, right? So anyways, if you can tell, I don't like the Catholic Church, the institution. Okay. If you're Catholic and you're watching this, I have nothing against you, but the institution of the Catholic Church needs to go. Like, they need to go. Anyways. So Cecilia is found with all of this blood on her bed, and they think she's having a miscarriage or something. So they bring her to the doctor in the infirmary, because they wouldn't let her go to the hospital to get herself checked out after she was nearly drowned. They like absolutely outright refused. They said it was dangerous to bring her to the hospital, which, like, Italy has socialized healthcare. So what are you talking about? So they bring her to the infirmary, decide that it would be better off to take her to the emergency room. They don't want to call an ambulance. They get her in the car. They start driving. So while they're driving there, Mother Superior is praying at the bed, at Cecilia's bed, and she discovers underneath the bed a decapitated chicken in a pillowcase. And she kind of puts two and two together that Cecilia has faked this entire thing by like slathering the blood all over her bed and all over herself. And so we see from the car, Father Tedeschi receive a phone call, and he's like, okay, I'll bring her back right away, in Italian. And Cecilia like books it. She makes a run for it through the fields. She's covered in blood. She gets caught by Father Tedeschi and I don't know whoever the other guy is. I thought when I saw the chicken in the pillowcase that was supposed to be alluding to like some satanic ritual that someone had attempted to make Cecilia miscarry. But no, that's not what was going on at all. And so they bring her back and, you know, it's Sydney Sweeney. We have to sexualize her. So they put her in the shower. Her and her hentai boobies are getting all cleaned up. So then Zaddy Tedeschi over here is wheeling her around in a wheelchair, and he brings her down to this like sub-level of the convent where he essentially shows her his lab. So he, as we heard earlier, is a failed geneticist. So what we discover is that he, for many years, has been trying to create a divine being or something like that by forcibly impregnating women, forcing them to give birth, and many of them have failed. Many women have died, and she's just become another one of these experiments, except she's lasted the longest. Like the baby is almost a full term. It's doing well. It's healthy. She's fine. I mean, psychologically, she's not well, obviously. In order to keep her from running and to kind of hobble her, they brand her feet with crucifixes, which she had seen as scars earlier on one of the elderly women as she was attending to her at her bedside. So she moves on. This goes by trimester. So she's in her third trimester. Mother Superior is doing an ultrasound at her bedside, and the two of them are alone, and she takes the opportunity to like club Mother Superior over the head and like basically bash her head in. So she attempts to escape. Father Tedeschi finds her in the lab. She has doused it in gasoline. She's holding out a lighter, and she's like, I'm ready to go up in flames with this whole damn thing. And he like wrestles it out of her hand. She's able to escape and at the same time light the whole thing on fire, along with Father Tedeschi, R.I.P. Hottie. And she's kind of like laying on the ground. She's in relief. She's also in labor. Like after she clubs Mother Superior, her water breaks. So she's in labor. All of this is happening. And then she realizes Father Tedeschi actually didn't die in the fire. He's just like half burned. Anyways, after this, he's chasing her through the catacombs that are beneath the convent, which I think is is that common? Is that a thing in convent? I have never been to a convent, so I wouldn't know. Father Crispy is chasing Cecilia through the catacombs. There's this, he wrestles her to the ground in this very like all interior inside the movie, fetal abduction scene. She stabs him with the holy nail, the Jesus nail, and she's able to escape the catacombs. And when she's out on the other side and she's in these like ancient ruins, essentially, she gives birth out there. And we never see the baby, but the ending scene is her picking up a very large rock, and that's the end. I give this a 2.5 stars. Okay, I give this 2.5 stars. I don't, as I already said, the lens through which it was shot and filmed, I don't appreciate. Given what is going on in the United States right now with women's healthcare rights being challenged, this movie, this is my controversial opinion, this movie would have been fantastic if it was directed by a woman. I just think that there's a piece here that would have worked really well in this current climate. And I'm surprised, you know, I know that when someone produces something in Hollywood, it essentially means that they bankroll it. So I don't know how much control Sydney Sweeney had over over this film in any way, shape, or form. But imagine if this was like a Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig kind of situation. I feel like she could have hit it out of the park. If they had taken it in a bit of a different direction. I mean, there's literally the theme of forced birth in this movie. So we really could have gone in a different direction. Instead, we decided we wanted to sexualize Sydney Sweeney, and that was like the bulk of what this movie was about, or the draw of this movie. And I think our girl has some great acting chops, and I feel like she's been She's getting the Megan Fox treatment, and I'm calling it that because when Megan Fox first came on the scene in Transformers, she was wholly treated like a sex object. And she's not my favorite person now, but I feel like she never had the chance to show us whether or not she could act. She was great in Jennifer's Body. I loved her in Jennifer's Body. And indeed, that movie had a very feminist lens to it, right? And I think that's part of the reason she took it on. Anyways, let me climb down from my soapbox. I hope that doesn't happen to Sydney Sweeney, and I hope that we can really see a lot more from her in depth. This movie was not great. It was not great. It's interesting that it has a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it says 71% of 168 critics' reviews are positive with an average rating of 6.4 out of 10. Genuinely surprised by that. I don't know if I already said this, but I gave it a 2.5 on Letterboxd. I think except for the piece that was explicitly about creating these abominations as a failed geneticist, this was basically Rosemary's Baby with nuns. And I hate to say this because I hate Roman Polanski. He's a PDF file, allegedly. But he did a better. Rosemary's Baby was a better movie. And I think the commentary about bodily autonomy, paradoxically enough, was more obvious in that movie. Probably because of Mia Farrow, if anything else. One of the reviews that I saw on Letterboxd that also only gave this movie 2 stars said, "Girl, you need to calm the fuck down." But yeah, that's my review for Immaculate. Tell me what you thought if you saw this movie. Do you also think that Sydney Sweeney needs to be in something maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less gross for her? Like, she needs a role where she can, like, show us what she is capable of. I just feel like, anyways. Like, comment, subscribe, all of the things. Give me a nun emoji. Is there a nun emoji? I don't know. If you don't know what else to comment, do something holy. All right. I am going to try to re-record that entire video on Late Night with the Devil, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, strangers.